Hello and welcome to another tier list video. Today we are taking a look at cereal mascots. Now I'm not going to be ranking these mascots based on how much I like their cereal. I'm going to have another list for that. This one I'm going to be just looking at, how entertaining are they as mascots? Do they represent the brand well? How do they show up in commercials? Are they funny? Are they interesting? Or are they just kind of annoying? So that's how I'm going to be ranking them. Starting us off, we have the Cheerios B. I'm pretty sure he actually has a name, but I honestly can't really think of it. I don't think they mention it too many times in the commercials, but I think the Cheerios B is a pretty good mascot. He's definitely not annoying. He does some pretty interesting things. He can be kind of funny sometimes in the commercials. Overall, I would say the Cheerios B is just a pretty well-rounded mascot. Not too much to complain, but not really too much to blow me away. So I think he'll find himself solidly in the B tier. Up next, we have Tony the Tiger. This one, it's kind of hard not to know his name. They say him in like every Frosted Flakes commercial. But honestly, just a super great mascot in my opinion. Represents the brand well. Looks like an absolute Giga Chad. I mean, he's completely buff too. I mean, look at that guy's chest. He could probably bench, 400, 500 pounds if I had to guess. Probably from eating all those Frosted Flakes. I'm personally not a huge fan of Frosted Flakes as cereal, but Tony the Tiger, I mean, you got to respect him as one of the best cereal mascots. He represents the brand well. He can sing, he can dance, he can do anything. Tony the Tiger, for me, a clear S tier. Definitely above most of the rest of the cereal mascots. Other cereal companies take notes because Tony the Tiger, they knew what they were doing when they made him. Up next, we have Captain Crunch himself from the Captain Crunch cereal. And honestly, I would say he's another pretty good one. He doesn't completely blow me away like Tony the Tiger does, but I think he represents the brand well. He's an old guy. He looks reliable. He looks friendly. In all the commercials, he's not like super over the top or anything, but he's just solid. Similar to the Cheerios B, he's just solid. And honestly, he just looks friendly, looks welcoming, like looks like a nice friendly grandpa. Captain Crunch mascot, really no complaints about him. Honestly, he's going to be in the A tier for me. Up next, we have the Raisin Bran Sun. Now, I've mentioned before that I cannot stand raisins, so Raisin Bran cereal I'm not a fan of, but I'm ignoring that for this list, just looking at the mascots. That being said, I also think the Raisin Bran mascot is terrible. Most of the time, the mascots, they either have like some sort of historical significance with the cereal, or they kind of make sense with like the cereal flavors. Raisin Bran, I don't know exactly how a sun relates to it, unless you're saying the sun is maybe drying up the grapes for the raisins. But the sun, I gotta say, he's not doing it for me. I don't know if you've seen Raisin Bran commercials, but it's usually just the sun sitting on the box talking. Like, there's not really a whole lot of animation, and I kind of get that because it's not a cereal that's targeted towards kids, so they're not going to focus as much on the the animation and the mascot itself. But overall, for me, the Raisin Bran Sun is just the worst one. It doesn't really represent the brand well. His face even looks kind of weird with his like mouth. Honestly, just for me, the Raisin Bran Sun is kind of failing in all categories, and for that reason, he can find himself in the F tier. Up next, we have the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Now, I love Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and there's kind of two mascots here because there's the Cinnamon Toast Crunch chef guy, which you see in the commercials, and then there's also these little, Cinnamon Toast Crunch pieces that you see more so in the recent commercials that they've been making. I'll consider both of these. I think the chef guy himself does a better job of representing the brand, similar to Captain Crunch. I think he's just a friendly, jolly guy, a pretty plump, chef himself when he's making the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I think he does a great job. That being said, these Cinnamon Toast Crunch tiles, I don't know how I feel about them. I mean, I'm pretty sure that they are clinically insane. They're cannibals, you see them in the commercials. They're hanging out. One of them licks the other person and says, "Oh, this person tastes good," and just eats them. I mean, these guys, they're psychopaths. I don't know how you can show this to kids, but these Cinnamon Toast Crunch tiles, they're scary, man. Honestly, this rating would be much higher for this one if it was just the Cinnamon Toast Crunch chef guy. But with these tiles, gotta say, it brings them down a little bit because they're pretty psychotic. Only gonna find themselves in the C tier. Love Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but don't know where they're going with their mascots recently. Up next, we have Lucky Charms Leprechaun. Honestly, he's an okay one. I think he does a good job of representing the Lucky Charms brand. You know, unlike the Sun for Raisin Bran, I think Lucky Charms, Leprechaun, it definitely makes sense. The connection is easy there. You know, he's on every box, you know, very familiar. That being said, I think nearly all the commercials really end up kind of the same way. There's not a whole lot of creativity, I find, that goes into, you know, how the Leprechaun is used in the commercials. So I think he's okay, but really not spectacular. And, you know, the lack of creativity in how he's used, a little bit disappointing. So Lucky Charms, Leprechaun, only going to find himself in the C tier. Up next, we have the Flintstones cereal with Fred and Barney Flintstone. I mean, I think the Flintstones cereal commercials also have other characters, especially Bam Bam. I see him show up a lot, but I just have Fred and Barney to represent the Flintstones cereal in general. And honestly, I mean, these guys are phenomenal. I think it's a bit unfair because the Flintstones was also a TV show, so there's just so many characters, and, you know, they all have their own specific personalities that's hard to paint in a mascot when you just have commercials. So these guys, they have a bit of an unfair advantage, but honestly, that put aside, they're still fantastic. I mean, they do a great job representing the Flintstone cereal. Flintstone cereal, I'm not a huge fan of it, but the commercials are always super good. And, you know, Flintstones, just great characters, gonna find themselves in the S tier. Up next, we have Apple Jacks. Now, this is a cereal that I haven't seen a commercial for in a long time. But honestly, these commercials, they were sweet. I loved these commercials. Every single time with the apple and the cinnamon stick, they'd always be competing, you know, racing to the box of cereal, and then they'd both get there at the same time, and that would be the apple cinnamon Applejack cereal. Not a huge fan of Applejack cereal, but honestly, these commercials were always so entertaining watching these guys compete. Definitely one of my favorite commercials to watch as far as cereal commercials go, so they will also find themselves in the S tier. Up next, we have the Cocoa Puffs Roadrunner. I believe he's a Roadrunner anyways, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But honestly, pretty disappointed with this one. Pretty much every single time, it's just, there's no plot to the commercials. It's just all of a sudden a bowl of Cocoa Puffs shows up and he tries to take a bite and he goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And it's funny the first time, maybe even the second time, but every single commercial is exactly the same cookie cutter, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So honestly, pretty disappointing. Gonna find himself in the D tier. Up next, we have Trix. Now, Trix, honestly, it suffers from the same ailments that hamper the Cocoa Puffs Roadrunner. Every single commercial is the same. There's, I would say, a little bit more variety with the Trix cereal, but honestly, it's just as disappointing. Every single commercial is the same. Silly rabbit, Trix are for kids. He's always trying to get the cereal. At least, I would say, in these commercials, there's a bit of variety in terms of how he goes about trying to get the Trix cereal, but honestly, you've seen one Trix commercial and you've seen them all, so gonna find himself in the D tier. Up next, we have the Rice Krispies, Snack, Crackle, and Pop. I gotta be honest, these guys, I would say, do some of the worst job of actually representing the cereal itself. I don't really know how these guys, Snack, Crackle, and Pop, are supposed to represent the cereal. I mean, sure, the names, if you pour a bowl of Rice Krispies and pour in the milk, it really does, snack, crackle, and pop if you listen to the cereal. That being said, I don't really know why these characters, I think they're supposed to be elves. I'm not really sure how they represent the cereal. I think you could replace elves with, like, literally anything and call them Snack, Crackle, and Pop and have them do just as good of a job, but not really super impressed with how they're used in the commercials. It's usually, a little girl listening to the bowl, and then she's like, oh, Snack, Crackle, and Pop are in the meadow, and then it pans to Snack, Crackle, and Pop, doing some activity. But honestly, they're not terrible. There is some variety in the commercials, but the mascots themselves just don't do a great job of representing the cereal, so they'll find themselves in a mediocre C tier. Up next, we have the Cookie Crisp Wolf. I mean, this guy is ferocious. I mean, he is an animal. Honestly, this guy is what the Cocoa Puffs Roadrunner should have been. I mean, this guy is like bonkers crazy for Cookie Crisp. But honestly, it's actually funny. And there's good variety in the commercials that I think he's used pretty well. I mean, this guy, he's just an absolute animal. But honestly, he's pretty good. And he's entertaining in the commercials, I will say. So he's going to find himself solidly in the A tier. Up next, we have Toucan Sam for Fruit Loops. And honestly, just another really good, classic, well-rounded mascot. No complaints about him at all, really. Pretty much every commercial has some good variety in terms of like what the plot, what the story is. And I think Toucan Sam, he's just a friendly guy. He just looks good. He's iconic. Overall, just a really solid mascot for the Fruit Loops cereal. Not a huge fan of Fruit Loops myself, but honestly, Toucan Sam, he's so recognizable and just a really solid mascot. So gonna find himself in the A tier. Up next, we have the Mini Wheats cereal. Now, honestly, I think these are what the Cinnamon Toast Crunch tiles could have been. You know, they're a bit friendlier. You know, there's plot, there's story. There's not really specifically named Mini Wheats characters. There's usually just a bunch of small ones like that. But honestly, I find the commercials always to be pretty funny. Whether it's, you know, some of them, you know, sitting in a bowl of milk with their towels on like they're in a sauna. Honestly, I think these guys do a pretty good job. There's not one specific Mini Wheat character that's iconic, but you know, all the commercials, I think they do a pretty good job, and honestly pretty impressed with the Mini Wheats mascots, so gonna find himself in the B tier. Well, that's my list. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed.